John Clayton, 710 ESPN Seattle. He'll be a part of the Seahawks broadcast.
Love John Clayton. I ever tell you I gave him directions once? We were sitting in the
Why would you wait till now to tell me that?
We were sitting in the post-game interview room, and he turned to me and
Does
said...
he know that?
I think so. You might remember.
Did he pick you out of line with that duster?
Well, no, I didn't have the mustache then. But he said, how do I get... What's the best way to get to the airport from here? And
What year is this?
Well, when the Eagles... It's Andy Reid Eagles-type era.
Well, maybe if you told him, I'm the guy that looks like Andy Reid.
Now I do.
John Clayton joins us here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN, Eagles, Seahawks, 710 ESPN. John, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good to be back, and thanks for the directions. It was perfect. I was able to make with no problem.
Those directions would have been helpful when he and I went to the game, Sixers game Monday night. He took us all over Philadelphia. We couldn't find our way to
That's
the
how
stadium.
I do the directions. You don't want to end up at the Navy Yard, or you don't want to end up under 95 in some alley.
Yeah,
you got to know where you're going.
Hey, John, the narrative here has been really that this is the Eagles' biggest test, but you're around the Seattle team all the time. They're not the same. This isn't the same team we've seen in the Russell Wilson era, right?
No, they're not the same. They're not as dominant, but they're still a good team. Because, okay, so they go from 8 Pro Bowlers to 5. I mean, 8 was kind of ridiculous. And also their depth is actually better than it's been probably in the last 4 years to be able to withstand the injuries. I mean, last year they lose Earl Thomas in the last 4 games in the season, and things just collapsed in the secondary. They gave up 284 yards a game. This year they were able to go with Earl Thomas missing or Cam Chancellor now being out for the season. You know, they've gone to Bradley McDougald, who has 36 starts with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's not like he's a Pro Bowl player. He's not, but he's minimized the damage. So, for example, you know, where you take Earl Thomas 4 games, 284, you take out Thomas for 1 week and then Chancellor for 2. During the last 3 weeks, they've given up 214 yards a game passing. So, you know, it's not the same. I mean, because normally this team can hold quarterbacks under 200 yards and to usually get a bunch of turnovers. So it's not as dominating, but it's still a dangerous team because, again, if you go and they were down 3 cornerbacks on Sunday. Okay, because Shaquille Griffin, who's a real good rookie, was out. You know, they don't have their starter from last year, Deshaun Shedd, and Richard Sherman's out. Yet they were able to throw out Jeremy Lane, who's had a lot of starts over the last couple of years and was a slot guy, a guy that they traded to Houston and came back when he failed his physical. And then I know, don't laugh, Byron Maxwell, who is now back in the system, you know, with the 45 or so starts that he's had in the National Football League. So, you know, at least they're able to weather some of the injuries better than most teams.
And we're not laughing that Maxwell, you know, that he was here. It's the fact that they've gone that far that they had to bring him back. You're right. It's been a mess out there. But how about the fact, you mentioned they've gone from 8 to 5. They're still a very prideful team. How are they handling the fact that they look at that line and see they're about a touchdown underdog in this game? That's something that doesn't happen.
It certainly enhanced the motivation of this team, you know, because you have to all go back to 2012 for something like that at a home game to happen. And so, you know, it really enhanced the practices they have. It's enhanced the conversation in the because this team, you know, like a lot of alpha dog teams, you know, alpha male teams. I mean, they love to get challenges, and they love it when you have disrespect because it motivates them more. And so you go through the locker room as I did on Wednesday, and you can see the extra motivation coming out there. You know, a lot of the guys are on edge because, again, they're not used to this. This is so different to get, you know, the people saying, okay, you can't do this and you can't do that. And so, you know, that will probably mean for better effort coming up on Sunday because, again, they haven't been in this position before.
John, how much has Jimmy Graham been a part and an emerging part of their offense? And when he first got out there, people are like, this isn't the Jimmy Graham we remember. But is he coming on of late and becoming the Jimmy Graham that everybody remembers?
Yes and no. I mean, on the yes part of it, they finally figured out the right way to use him in the red zone, which is basically flank him out in a slot and then have him do either a fade or do some kind of a slant, and he can get a touchdown because he's so much taller than anybody that's going to cover him. So that's worked out. But the other problem is he's been dropping a lot of passes. I mean, particularly in just regular sets, and that's been the bad. But overall, you know, it's funny because, you know, he came here, did well the first year, and then of course he gets the bad knee injury with the patellar tendon, and he had to fight through just trying to manage to play each week. And so last year, he almost had 1,000 yards. He just didn't get the touchdowns. So he went to the Pro Bowl in a year after a patellar tendon. This year started slow, but finally they started splitting him out, and that's worked pretty well. So he's been, since coming here, their number 2 target. It's just been up and down as far as the right way they use him and the wrong ways.
Hey, John, when the Eagles look at Seattle, the first name is Russell Wilson. The Eagles have been so balanced, but the first name that they're preparing for has got to be Carson Wentz, correct?
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, because, they...
In other words, is his name spread all the way to the Pacific Northwest in terms of the year that he's having? It's not just in this vacuum.
Well, it's spread because it's like, okay, there's always a thought here because of Russell Wilson eating up 82% of the offensive yards that he's in the MVP race, but he has to take a spot behind, Carson Wentz number 1 and Tom Brady number 2. So naturally, that name has generated here all the way through because, when they bring up Russell Wilson and MVP, okay, you're third, but you're 2 spots behind Carson Wentz. And he's been that good. So, no, I think it's generated all the way through. And, this team had, I guess you could say still has, but had expired to be a number 1 or number 2 seed. Odds of that happening aren't very good right now. But so much of that has been the play of Carson Wentz and then just the buildup of the roster for the Philadelphia Eagles.
John, we know about Doug Baldwin. We know about Jimmy Graham. We know about some of the receiving threats. But is there a threat in the rushing game, or is it just the guy that wears number 3?
Right now, it's just the guy wearing number 3. I mean, they've had nothing at the running game position. Here's how bad it's gotten: is that their best 2 running backs, their best 3 running backs is a 7th-round pick who's on injured reserve, Chris Carson. Their second best running back is a guy who was on the practice squad a couple weeks ago, Mike Davis, a draft choice a couple years ago in San Francisco, and now he had an injury last week, and so he missed a game. He's back, and then J.D. McKissick, who's really just kind of a quick back, who's powerful, but he's not real big, and he can get some screen passes and some quick runs to the side, but that's it. I mean, Eddie Lacy's been invisible, although I guess he's visible because he's 245 pounds, and he can't do better than like about 2 yards a carry. And then Thomas Rawls, probably the biggest mystery of all, kind of losing his way because it's like he's just not running right. I mean, he runs fast, but he doesn't get to the right holes. He doesn't follow the blocks good, so that hasn't worked out. C.J. Prosise is a real talented draft choice, 230 pounds. He's always hurt, so now he's on the injured reserve list. But here's the weird part, and everybody is valid in this. Their 6th best running back, and I'm talking about there was 5 running backs ahead of Alex Collins. So they cut Alex Collins because he showed nothing, and he's gained more yards than any back combined probably in the last 2 years for the Seattle Seahawks.
John Clayton, 710 ESPN. And let me ask you about where this team is in terms of the playoffs. They're not in right now, so this is a huge game for them. Philadelphia has a lot, not locked up, but they're 10-1. They're going to win that division for the most part. So do you sense that the Seahawks can steal it being at home? They've lost 2 games at home again this year, which is unheard of almost. So does it feel out there that this is a game that there could be an upset?
Yeah, they definitely feel it because, again, they're good at home. And if you go back into 2 losses, both were kind of weird because, here's Washington coming in, and they didn't play so much of their troubles is slow starts on offense. I mean, I think they've gone like 28 straight games on the opening drive, and they haven't had a touchdown drive. And usually they don't get points in the first quarter unless the defense gets it. So they're always either playing a little bit from behind, but what happens is, they'll get into the fourth quarter, and Russell Wilson will go crazy. So he did, and he brought him back in the Washington game, but then all of a sudden Kirk Cousins, they have man defense against him. He hits 2 passes, and they get the win there. And then the Falcons came back with that last drive and be able to pull out a wild game on Monday night. So those are the 2 losses, but in each of those games, Russell Wilson was in a position where he was able to come back and put things on the scoreboard and almost win the game. So I would imagine it's going to be the same type of a game where it will come down that Russell Wilson will have to scramble in the fourth quarter and see if he can do something. But no, they haven't given up the idea that they can still get into the playoffs and be a factor. The problem that they face right now, if they make the playoffs and win the division, they're probably going to be a number 4 seed, and that means they have to win 2 games on the road to get to the Super Bowl, and that's tough.
John, since you put out there that the Seahawks rarely lose at home, which they rarely do, 88-37 NFC home records since 2002, could you also give Mike and I an idea of what the atmosphere and how loud it gets down? I mean, Mike and I have heard like earplugs and pregame, and you're down there, you experience it. The crowd really can make a factor.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, again, since the stadium opened, they lead the league in false starts, and usually the crowd goes so loud with the silent count and everything else that each quarterback coming in here is going to have a couple of those. And you can see even games when Colin Kaepernick was in the 49ers. I mean, he almost got lost so much because of all the crowd noise and all those different problems. But no, being on the field, I mean, you can definitely at different times need the earplugs. Like, for example, when the game starts, for the most part, if I'm getting a cue from upstairs to go on the sidelines, because I do the opposing team sideline. So if I'm on there on the Eagles sideline, I may not be able to hear what's going on because it's so loud.
And he'll be on the sideline Sunday night for Eagles and Seahawks, 710 ESPN's John Clayton. John, you covered the league for a long time. I'd like to hear your reaction to what's happened in New York with the Giants. And it seems that as this week has gone on with Eli and everything, there's more and more theories coming out that they actually make the change because they actually don't want to win games so that they can get a better draft selection. You know, that's the way that a lot of sports franchises are thinking now. Lose so that you can get better picks. So what is your take on how the Giants and everything went down this week?
I cannot imagine the Mara family or the Tisch family allowing even that thought to be in the minds of the people running the show there, because again, that's just they care about the integrity of the team and the league, and even with Ben McAdoo, they're not firing him during the season because they're respectful enough to let him coach through the entire year and then probably fire him at the end of the year. But I think it was just an absolute disaster that keeps getting worse. And where I say it keeps getting worse is that here's John Mara. He's at an owners meeting in New York, and so they inform him of the benching, and then they hear how bad it was when they basically tell him it's like, hey, you can still keep your starting streak, you just can't play. We'll get you out there to start in a Yankee after a while. Well, that was embarrassing. The fact that they're doing it for Geno Smith is equally embarrassing, and you can see both current and former players from the Giants are just ripping this whole way that it was handled. Phillip Rivers ripped it, and everybody should rip it. It was handled bad. And then to make matters worse, Ben McAdoo comes out late in the week, and he says, oh, no, Maris and I are on the same page on this, and we think we handled it okay, and we do it the same the second way. Well, go back into the office and John Mara and say that to him after he came back and ripped the way it was done. I mean, to me, this is a colossal disaster. I just wonder if, in the big picture, the Tennessee athletic director is kind of running this whole thing.
Good stuff,
John Clayton, 710 ESPN, and the Eagles will be in Seattle to take on the Seahawks. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Pleasure, John. Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you.